Welcome back to Horror Galaxy. Tonight I have 4 untold disturbing true Oregon small town horror for you. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed, because once you step onto the Horror Galaxy, you don't walk alone. I had my boots planted in the mud and both hands wrapped around a waterlogged tire when someone upstream shouted for us to pull together. I leaned back with the others, felt the rope bite into my palms, and the tire finally came loose with a sucking sound that made my stomach turn. It rolled onto the bank and landed hard, spraying brown water over my jeans. I remember laughing under my breath, partly from relief, partly because my arms were shaking. I wiped my hands on my thighs and stepped back toward the river, already scanning for the next piece of trash caught in the branches. That was when I saw the sleeve. It was pinned under a tangle of driftwood just below the surface, dark fabric fluttering slightly in the current. At first, I thought it was another jacket someone had tossed in years ago, the way people treated this stretch of river like a dump whenever it flooded. I pointed it out to Mark, who was standing next to me, and told him we should free it before it wrapped tighter around the branches. We waded in together, water pressing cold against my legs, and I reached down to grab the fabric. The moment my fingers closed around it, something in my chest tightened. The material was heavier than it should have been, not just soaked but weighted, like it was holding onto something that didn't want to come loose. "Careful," Mark said, his voice casual. "Might be attached to more junk." I nodded, but I already knew it wasn't junk. I pulled again, and the jacket shifted, revealing a shoulder, then a pale hand floating just beneath the surface, fingers curled as if they'd stiffened that way. I let go without thinking and stumbled backward, water sloshing loudly as I nearly lost my balance. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Hey," Mark said sharply. "You all right?" I didn't answer. I was staring at the hand, at the way the skin looked waxy and swollen, at the dark line around the wrist where the sleeve ended. My mouth felt dry, and when I tried to swallow, it hurt. Someone else noticed the commotion and shouted, and suddenly people were moving closer, voices overlapping. I forced myself to speak, though it came out rough. There's a body." Everything stopped after that. The easy chatter disappeared, replaced by an awkward, frightened quiet broken only by the river moving past us. A couple of people backed away. Someone swore softly. Mark put a hand on my shoulder, steadying me, and I realized I was shaking. We didn't touch it again. We stood there while someone ran to call the sheriff from the truck, parked up the road. I kept my eyes on the jacket, on the familiar way the fabric folded near the zipper, on the small tear near the elbow that I knew too well. I knew that jacket. I tried to tell myself I was wrong. I tried to focus on my breathing, on the feel of Mark's hand still gripping my shoulder, but my mind kept going back years, back to a different day on this same river. I'd been younger then, careless, wading too far out while fishing with friends. The current had been stronger than I expected, and I'd slipped, gone under for a few terrifying seconds. I'd made it back to shore coughing and laughing, but my jacket had torn loose and been swept away before I could grab it. We'd watched it disappear around the bend, and I'd joked about the river stealing it. Standing there now, staring at the sleeve pinned under driftwood, I didn't feel like joking. The sheriff arrived with a deputy, their boots crunching on gravel as they approached. They asked us to step back, to give them room. I moved automatically, my legs feeling weak, my eyes still drawn to the jacket like it was a magnet. The sheriff waded in carefully and confirmed what we already knew. His face changed in a way I'd never seen before, tightening with something close to unease. They worked slowly, respectfully, freeing the body from the branches. As more of it surfaced, my stomach twisted. The jacket wasn't just similar to mine. It was mine. I could see the faded patch on the chest I'd sewn on myself, crooked and uneven. I could see the way the zipper pull was bent slightly to one side, something I'd never bothered to fix. I heard myself make a sound, low and broken, and Mark turned to look at me. "What is it?" he asked. "That's my jacket," I said. The words sounded wrong, like they didn't belong together. He frowned, shaking his head. "No way. I lost it here," I said, my voice rising. "Years ago, same spot." Mark didn't answer. He just looked back at the river, at the body being guided toward the bank, and I saw the doubt on his face give way to something else. The sheriff noticed me then. He asked my name, my age, where I lived. I answered mechanically. My mind split between the present and memories that kept crashing in. He asked how I recognized the jacket, and I told him everything, my hands gesturing uselessly as I spoke. He listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving mine. When he asked if I'd be willing to come down to the station later to give a formal statement, I nodded. I would have agreed to anything at that point, just to keep from thinking too hard about what lay on the bank. They covered the body with a tarp before loading it onto a stretcher. As they lifted it, the jacket slipped open slightly, and for a brief moment, I saw the face. It was my face. Not exactly, not like looking in a mirror, but close enough that my breath caught painfully in my chest. The nose had the same slight bend from a break in high school. The mouth was slack, the lips pale, but the shape was mine. The hair was darker, longer than I wore it now, but I could see myself in it, the version of me I remembered from years ago. I turned away and retched into the grass, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. Someone rubbed my back. Someone handed me water. Their voices sounded far away. I don't remember the drive home. I remember sitting at my kitchen table afterward, staring at my hands, scrubbing them over and over in the sink until the skin felt raw. I remember my wife asking what was wrong and me not knowing how to answer without sounding insane. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the jacket floating just beneath the surface, the sleeve waving like it was trying to get my attention. By morning, I felt hollowed out, like something had been scooped from inside me and replaced with cold air. At the station later, they asked more questions. Where had I been the day I lost the jacket? Who was with me? Had I ever known anyone who looked like the body they'd recovered? I answered honestly, growing more unsettled with every word. The deputy showed me a photograph taken after they'd cleaned the body up. The resemblance was undeniable. They ran fingerprints. They checked dental records. They compared scars. Each match felt like a hammer blow. A small scar on the left hand from a broken bottle when I was in my 20s. A chip in the same tooth I'd cracked on a fishing hook. Details I'd forgotten until someone else pointed them out. The sheriff sat across from me, his hands folded, his expression serious. "I need to ask you something," he said carefully. "Do you remember ever losing time? Days, weeks you can't account for?" I thought back, searching my memory for gaps. There were none big enough to explain this. "No," I said. "I've lived here my whole life. Same job, same family. I've never disappeared." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. "The body's been in the water a long time," he said. "Years. The timeline matches when you said you lost the jacket." I laughed then, a short, brittle sound. "That's not possible," I said. "I'm right here." He didn't argue with me. He just watched, his eyes heavy. They let me go home, telling me they'd be in touch. The walk from the car to my front door felt longer than it ever had. Inside, everything looked normal, familiar. My wife was making dinner. The smell filled the house. I stood there, overwhelmed by the ordinariness of it all. That night, I pulled out old photo albums. I needed proof, something solid. I spread them across the living room floor, flipping through pages with shaking hands. There I was at 20, wearing the jacket, smiling into the camera. There I was years later, still wearing it, the patch visible on my chest. Then, after the day I'd lost it, the jacket was gone, replaced by another, newer one. What bothered me wasn't the continuity. It was the feeling that the photos before that day felt different, heavier, like they belonged to someone else. The sheriff called 2 days later. They'd identified the body. Officially, it was me. Same name, same birth date. The record showed a death by drowning, estimated to have occurred around the time I lost the jacket. The river had kept hidden him, until now. I asked the question I'd been avoiding. What does that make me? There was a long pause on the line. Alive, the sheriff said finally. As far as I can tell. After that, things started to make sense in a way I didn't like. The faint memories I'd brushed off before. The sense, sometimes, that I was watching my life instead of living it. The way certain places along the river always made my skin prickle. I went back there alone a week later. Standing on the bank where it had all happened, I didn't know what I was looking for. Closure, maybe. Answers. I watched the water move past. Relentless and indifferent. I'm sorry, I said aloud, my voice barely more than a whisper. I didn't know who I was apologizing to, but the words felt necessary. The river didn't respond. It just kept flowing, carrying whatever secrets it chose. In the weeks that followed, the official story settled. A tragic accident, an unsolved oddity. People stopped asking questions. Life went on. But something inside me had shifted permanently. I started dreaming of the river, of being pulled under, of hands grasping at nothing. I woke up gasping, my heart racing. My wife noticed the change. The way I flinched at the sound of rushing water, the way I avoided that stretch of road near the bank. One evening, months later, I finally told her everything. She listened in silence, her face pale. When I finished, she took my hands and held them tightly. "You're here," she said firmly. "You're with me." That's what matters. I wanted to believe her. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I think about the man in the river, about the life he lived up to that moment. Was he me or was I him? Did the river take one of us and leave the other behind by mistake? I don't go near the water anymore. I've learned to respect what it can take and what it can give back. I live my life carefully now, deliberately, holding on to every moment like it might slip away if I'm not paying attention. Because once, a long time ago, the river decided I didn't belong to it anymore. And when it finally returned what it had taken, it made sure I understood the cost. I was behind the desk counting the drawer for the third time because the total kept coming up short by the same amount it always did, and I knew before I even opened the ledger what I was going to find. My hands were shaking in that familiar, tired way as I flipped to the last page and saw the neat entry already written there, the ink still darker than the rest. Room 6. Paid in full. Cash. I remember laughing under my breath, the kind of laugh you make when you do not have any other reaction left, and saying out loud, "You have got to be kidding me," even though no one was there to hear it. I had been working the night shift at the motel in Oak Ridge for almost a year by then. It was not glamorous, but it paid my rent and let me keep my days free. Most nights were the same, checking in loggers or truckers, brewing stale coffee, watching the security monitors until my eyes blurred. Room 6 was not part of my routine. It had been sealed long before I started. Everyone knew about it. A woman had been killed there, beaten to death by her boyfriend during a weekend stay, and after the trial, the owner decided to lock it up rather than deal with the reputation. The door stayed shut, the key card disabled, the curtains drawn. We did not talk about it unless a guest asked, and even then we changed the subject fast. The first time the payment showed up, I thought it was a mistake. There was a crisp stack of bills tucked into an envelope in the drop safe, marked with the room number and the date. I asked my manager about it the next morning, holding it out to him like something dirty. He frowned, said it must have been an old entry, told me to log it and move on. "If it keeps happening," he said, already turning away. "Well, look into it." It kept happening. Every month, always on the same night, the same amount of cash appeared. No guest name, no receipt printed. Just money, exact to the cent we used to charge before the room was sealed. I started marking the dates in my own notebook, drawing little boxes and filling them in when the payment arrived. It became a countdown I could not stop watching. I checked the cameras the first time I worked the night it was due. I watched the hallway monitor until my eyes ached, waiting to see someone slip toward room 6. Nothing. The corridor stayed empty, the door untouched. At 3 in the morning, I went back to the safe, heart hammering, and there it was. Another envelope. I told myself it had to be someone with access. Maintenance, maybe. The owner. Someone playing a sick joke. But the cameras did not lie. I scrubbed through the footage frame by frame. No one entered, no one exited. The door to room 6 stayed closed the entire night. By the 4th month, I was dreading that shift. I felt it in my stomach all evening, a tightness that made me nauseous. I started double locking the front doors. Even though policy said to keep one unlocked, I kept the desk lamp on brighter than usual. I talked to myself just to hear a human voice. When the time came, I stood in front of the safe with the key in my hand, telling myself not to open it, telling myself it did not matter. I opened it anyway. The envelope was thicker this time. Inside, along with the cash, there was a scrap of motel stationery. No writing, just a faint, greasy imprint, like someone had pressed their palm hard against the paper. I dropped it back into the safe and slammed the door, my breath coming fast and shallow. I did not log the payment until morning. I could not make myself write it down. I started avoiding the hallway. If I had to bring towels or ice, I took the long way around. I kept my eyes on the floor when I passed the door to room 6, afraid of what I might see if I looked directly at it. The silence around that door felt heavier than anywhere else in the building. I could feel it pressing against me, like a held breath. The owner finally agreed to review the footage with me after I cornered him in his office and refused to leave. We sat side by side, watching the same empty hallway I had watched so many times alone. When the envelope appeared in the safe on the screen, without anyone touching it, his face went pale. He rewound it, played it again, leaned closer. He did not say anything for a long time. "We'll stop taking the money," he said finally. "If it shows up again, I don't know. We'll donate it or something." He did not meet my eyes when he said it. The next month, the envelope was waiting on the desk instead of in the safe. My name was written on it in careful, uneven letters. I felt cold all over when I picked it up. Inside was the same amount of cash and another piece of paper. This one had words. "Thank you for keeping it quiet." I read it 3 times, my vision tunneling, my ears ringing. I knew then that whatever this was, it knew me. It knew my schedule, my habits. It knew I was the one working nights, the one counting the drawer, the one logging the payments and not telling anyone anymore. I tried to quit the next day. I rehearsed what I was going to say, how I would explain it without sounding insane. But when I stood in front of my manager, the words would not come. He looked exhausted, older than he had a month ago. "We need you," he said before I could speak, "just until we find someone else." I stayed. I started having dreams about room 6, not about the murder, not about blood or screaming, but about standing in the doorway while someone behind me counted out bills, one by one, each slap of paper against paper echoing too loud in the empty room. I would wake up with the sound still in my ears, my hands clenched. The envelope came again, and again, Each time, a new message, polite, grateful, reminding me to log the payment to keep things orderly. Once there was a request, please do not enter the room. I had not planned to, but the idea that it needed to ask made something in me snap. I spent the rest of that shift staring at the keycard machine, thinking about the disabled card for room 6. Thinking about the spare mechanical key locked in the office drawer, the one only management was supposed to use. I knew where the key to that drawer was kept. I had used it before to get extra paper. When my shift ended, I did not go home. I waited until the lobby filled with the noise of morning checkouts, then slipped into the office and took the key. My hands were steady in a way they had not been in weeks. I told myself I was ending it, that once I knew, I could leave. The door to room 6 was heavier than the others. It resisted when I turned the key, then gave way with a soft click. The air inside was stale, unmoving. The room looked exactly as it had the night it was sealed. The bed was made, the trash emptied, the television off. It was like time had stopped. On the desk by the window was a stack of envelopes. They were all identical, all neatly arranged, each one labeled with a date. Past dates. Months, years. Going back to the year of the murder. I flipped through them, my chest tightening as I recognized the amounts, the handwriting changing slightly over time. This had been happening long before me. There was a ledger too, thicker than ours, at the desk, filled with careful entries. Names, initials, notes in the margins. Night clerks, managers, owners. Some names were crossed out. Some had a single word written beside them, left. Fired, died. My name was there, added at the end. No note yet. I did not hear the door close behind me. I only noticed because the room felt smaller suddenly, the silence deeper. I turned slowly, my heart in my throat, and saw nothing. The door was shut, locked. The voice came from behind me, close enough that I could feel breath on my neck. You weren't supposed to do that. It did not sound angry. It sounded disappointed. I do not know how long I stood there, frozen, my mind screaming while my body refused to move. When I finally found my voice, it came out hoarse. What do you want? There was a pause. Then, continuity. I felt a pressure at my back, not a touch, but the promise of one. The room needs to stay occupied, the voice said. Someone needs to keep it paid for. Not everyone is willing. I thought of the crossed out names. What happens if I say no? The pressure increased, just enough to make my knees wobble. Then you stop being useful. I nodded. I said yes. I said whatever it wanted to hear. The pressure eased. The door unlocked. When I stumbled into the hallway, shaking, the room behind me was silent again, empty. I finished my shift. I logged the payment. I went home and threw up until there was nothing left. Then I slept. I worked there for another 3 months. I did what I was told. I logged the payments. I did not enter the room again. I kept it quiet. When a guest asked about room 6, I smiled and said it was out of order. The last envelope came on my final night. There was no cash inside. Just a note. You have been very helpful. You may go. I quit the next morning. Moved out of Oak Ridge a week later. I do not work nights anymore. I still check my bank account on the date the payment used to appear. Every month. So far, nothing. But sometimes, when I wake up from a dream of counting bills in the dark, my hands smell faintly of paper and old ink. And I know room 6 is still being paid for, just not by me. I step onto the ice with my weight forward and my boots spread, the metal probe biting down through the frozen skin of the lake, and I feel the vibration before I hear it, a faint tremor rising through my arms that does not belong to cracking ice. I pause, breathing shallow, listening, telling myself it is only pressure shifting below, but then the sound comes again, low and hollow, like iron struck underwater. My stomach tightens because I know that sound. I have heard bells before, in town, in churches, in funerals, and this carries the same shape, stretched and warped, but unmistakable. I lift the probe and strike again, harder this time, to test the thickness, and a hairline fracture blooms outward, spidering beneath my feet. The lake answers with another toll, slower, deliberate, as if waiting for me to act. I straighten, scanning the ice, half expecting faces or shadows, but there is nothing, only white and the faint blue beneath. I tell myself I am tired. That sound travels strangely through ice. That old debris can ring. I tell myself this job is about safety, not stories. I take another step, careful, remembering the checklist folded in my coat. Inspect, measure, mark, move on. My breath fogs the air in front of my face, and the sound comes again, closer now, or maybe clearer. I kneel, press my ear to the ice despite the cold biting through the fabric, and there it is, unmistakable, a bell tone rising and falling, as if swung by a hand that knows the rhythm. My first thought is of the church bells that used to hang in town before I was born. The ones older men spoke about in low voices after drinks, the ones taken down after people disappeared, though no one ever said the two things were connected. I had dismissed those stories as local color, the kind that grows in small places with long winters. Now my throat feels tight, and I push myself upright, suddenly aware of how alone I am out here. I radio in, my voice sounding thin even to my own ears, saying I am hearing something unusual, probably debris. Probably nothing, but I want someone to know. The radio crackles, answers delayed, distorted by distance, and I do not like the way the sound echoes back at me, layered over the bell tone beneath the ice. I am told to continue if it is safe. Safe. The word feels meaningless on my tongue. I move toward the center, marking thickness as I go, each strike followed by a pause, each pause filled with that patient ringing. It is not constant. It waits. When I stop, it stops. When I move, it follows, like it is aware of me. My hands shake, and I force them still, angry at myself for letting nerves take over. I have inspected dozens of lakes. Ice sings, ice groans. But ice does not keep time. I reach a point where the ice thins unexpectedly, and the probe punches through with a splash. I jump back, heart hammering, and the bell sound surges louder than before, resonant enough that I feel it in my teeth. Water wells up through the hole, dark and moving, and beneath it, something glints. Not fish, metal, curved. I stare, frozen in place, as the water sloshes and the sound fades, leaving a ringing in my ears that does not go away. I mark the spot, my movements automatic, my mind racing. There should not be metal here, not like that. I force myself to finish the immediate area, working outward, the sound silent now, as if satisfied. By the time I head back, my legs feel weak, and every step is an act of will. When I reach solid ground, I drop my gear and retch, the bell towing echoing behind my eyes. I report the find, downplaying my fear, emphasizing the metal, the safety concern. Within days, a team is assembled. They bring divers, equipment, seriousness. I am told to stay back, but I insist on being there. I need to know I did not imagine it. The lake is cut open, ice removed in slabs, water churned and dark. When the first object is raised, the air goes quiet. A bell, heavy, old, its surface scarred but intact. More follow. One by one, bells are hauled up, their clappers intact, their surfaces etched with names and dates. Church bells. The ones from town records removed and sold, supposedly, only they were never sold. They were lowered into the lake, tied together, sunk deliberately. The divers speak in hushed voices about ropes leading away into the depths, about shapes they do not want to describe. The investigation that follows is careful, slow and devastating. Records are re-examined, deaths reconsidered. People who vanished decades earlier are connected not by rumor, but by evidence, by the bells that marked their lives and deaths. I give my statement again and again, each time reliving the sound, the waiting. The town changes. Conversations stop when I enter rooms. Some thank me. Some will not meet my eyes. At night I dream of the ice cracking, of the bells swinging free, ringing without hands. I wake sweating, my ears full of phantom sound. Counseling helps, they say, and I try, but the truth is simpler. I heard something I was not meant to hear, and it heard me back. When the lake finally thaws and the bells are removed, the water is quiet. Too quiet. The town holds a service, names read aloud, bells absent. I return to my work eventually, though never alone on the ice again. The checklist remains the same. But I listen differently now, attuned to what should not be there. Sometimes, when the ice is thick and the world feels still, I think I hear a faint echo. Not from below, but from memory, and I remind myself that some sounds are meant to stay buried, and that I was lucky to walk away when the lake decided to speak. I am flipping through the registry with one hand, while holding the phone with the other, telling a confused man that no, I cannot find any record of his marriage, even though he insists it happened here. I am already irritated because this is the third call this morning, and I have not even finished my first cup of coffee. I ask him to spell his name again slower, and I scan the page where it should be. There is a gap between two entries, a clean space where something might have been erased, but nothing is written there now. I tell him I am sorry and hang up before he can argue. I sit back in my chair, rubbing my eyes, telling myself that small-town record-keeping is messy and people misremember dates all the time. I turn back to the book because my supervisor wants the older registries cross-checked against the digital system, and I am already behind. The registry is heavy, its spine cracked from decades of use, and as I flip the page, my finger catches on something. There is an entry written in ink, slightly darker than the rest. The names look ordinary, the date looks ordinary, but the residence line is blank. I pause, pen hovering, and read it again. Bride, groom, witnesses, officiant. Everything filled out neatly except where the addresses should be. That is unusual, but not impossible. People forget. Clerks forget. I shrug and keep working. By late afternoon, I have found 4 more entries like that. Same thing every time. Clean handwriting, complete information, and then nothing where a person should exist in town records. I start feeling that tight pressure behind my eyes. That means a headache is coming on. I tell myself to stop overthinking it. I live in a place where people move in and out, where someone can live just outside town limits and still get married here. It is not my job to solve mysteries, just to log what is already written. When I get home, I keep thinking about the gap in that first page. I open my laptop and log into the town database, more out of curiosity than anything else. I type in the first name from memory. Nothing comes up. I try the second. Nothing again. I try the efficient, expecting at least that to work, but the system tells me no match found. I feel a flicker of unease then, something small but sharp. I tell myself the database is incomplete. It is old. It crashes all the time. I close the laptop and go to bed, telling myself I am being dramatic. The next morning, the registry is already open on my desk when I arrive, even though I am sure I locked it away the night before. I stand there for a moment, my hand still on my bag, trying to remember if I came in early and forgot. I know I did not. I am very particular about routines. I close the book, check the lock, and it clicks shut easily. I tell myself someone else must have needed it. I start working again, slower now. I am paying attention in a way I was not before, reading every name instead of skimming. That is when I notice something that makes my stomach drop. One of the entries lists my own handwriting. Not my signature, but the same looping way I write capital letters, the same habit of pressing harder on downstrokes. The name signed as clerk is not mine, but the hand is unmistakably similar. I feel heat rise up my neck as I stare at it, trying to convince myself it is coincidence. I call my supervisor and ask her if she remembers a wedding from that date. She laughs lightly and says she does not remember last week, let alone years ago. I ask her if the registry has ever been altered. She tells me not to start inventing problems and reminds me that the audit deadline is approaching. I hang up feeling embarrassed and unsettled. Around noon, a woman comes to the counter. She is polite, nervous, twisting her hands together. She says she needs a certified copy of her marriage license. I ask for her name, already bracing myself. When she says it, my chest tightens. It is one of the names from the registry. I type it into the system, and as expected, nothing appears. I tell her there must be an error and ask for identification. She slides her card across the counter. The name matches. The photo looks like her. My mouth goes dry. I tell her to wait and go to the back room. I pull the registry from the shelf with shaking hands and flip to the page. The entry is there. I bring the book back and show it to her, pointing at the line. She nods eagerly and says, "Yes, that is it, that is us." I ask her where she lives now. She gives me an address I know does not exist. I tell her gently that I cannot process the request without a matching record in the system. Her smile fades. She asks me what I mean. I do not know how to answer. She leaves without yelling, which somehow makes it worse. I sit there afterward, staring at the counter, feeling like the ground has shifted under me. I know what I saw. I know that woman exists in front of me, but according to every official record we have, she does not. Over the next few days, it keeps happening. People come in asking for records that should not exist. Some are angry, some are confused, some are quietly terrified. Each time the registry has their marriage neatly recorded. Each time the rest of the town records show nothing. I start sleeping poorly, waking up with my heart racing, thinking about blank address lines and familiar handwriting. One evening, alone in the office, I decide to do something I know I should not. I compare the dates of the strange entries to missing persons reports archived in another database. I tell myself I am just checking for overlaps. I find them immediately. Every single name from the registry lines up with someone reported missing within months of the listed marriage date. My hands start shaking so badly I have to sit down on the floor. I scroll further and see a pattern. The missing person is always listed as single in police records. No spouse. No family claiming benefits. It is like the marriage never counted except here, in this book. I feel sick. I feel like I am looking at something I was never meant to see. I flip back to the earliest entry and read it carefully. The officiant's name appears again and again. I search it online and find nothing. No license, no obituary, no trace. Just a name that exists only in ink. That night, I dream I am stamping at the counter, stamping papers for people whose faces blur the longer I look at them. I wake up crying, my sheets twisted around my legs. The next morning, I open the registry and find a new entry at the very end. The ink is still slightly glossy. The names make my breath catch. One of them is mine. I read it over and over, my vision tunneling. The date is that day. The officiant is the same. The signature for clerk looks exactly like my hand. I do not panic. That surprises me. I feel strangely calm, like a decision has already been made. I close the book, lock it away, and walk out of the building without telling anyone. I drive to the address listed for my spouse. It is an empty lot, overgrown and silent. I understand then. The registry is not recording marriages. It is finalizing them. The moment the ink dries, the town lets go of you. You become someone who once existed. I go back to the office, unlock the registry, and tear out my page. The paper rips easily. I burn it in the sink, watching the ink curl and vanish. The next day, I still exist. My records are intact. The registry is missing one page. No one questions it. The calls stop. The people do not come back. I finish the audit and submit it on time. I still work there. I still do my job. But I watch the registry carefully now. And when a new entry appears that should not be there, I remove it before the ink can settle.